Tonight, a new ethics complaint has just been filed against a Nashville judge. It comes during an ongoing debate about judges and whether they face enough scrutiny in Tennessee about what they do in court. A top judicial expert tells the Channel 4i team this recent complaint raises issues about the public's confidence in the legal system. Here's Chief Investigative Reporter Jeremy Finley.
So much attention has been put on judges lately after a legislative hearing showed 90% of complaints against judges are dismissed by a board that's responsible for disciplining judges. Some of those complaints are about judges not recusing themselves in cases where there's a claim of an appearance of conflict. So consider that when you watch this.
My whole world just was turned upside down.
Annette Olerud thought she had been through the worst. First, there was despair. Her daughter Rachel died from cancer. Then there was anger. Annette sued for malpractice against a doctor who had worked for Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. Then there was disappointment when the judge who oversaw the case, Judge Haynes, ruled in favor of the hospital. Finally, there was outrage after when the judge made her ruling, Olerud thought to check out that judge.
And I decided to do a web search. And the first thing that popped up was a Vanderbilt newsletter that says Judge Haynes has been named as chairman of the board of directors of Vanderbilt Children's Hospital.
Wait a second. The judge who oversaw a malpractice lawsuit against Vanderbilt Children's Hospital was at one time chairman of the board of Vanderbilt's Children's Hospital and is still on its board? Yep. And none of that was ever disclosed to the parents before, during, or after the hearings on the lawsuit.
And I said, how can this not be a conflict of interest?
So Olerud's attorney filed this motion for the judge to recuse herself, saying this was a conflict. Attorneys representing the hospital countered, saying the board Judge Haynes sits upon does not govern the hospital, that it only advises and advocates for the hospital. So there is insufficient grounds for a recusal. And guess who got to decide the matter? Judge Haynes herself. And she ruled that her judgment was final. So should she have recused herself? The Channel 4i team sought out one of the nation's top judicial ethics experts, Stephen Gilbert from New York University's law school. We spoke to him via Skype.
Yeah, I think she has to recuse herself in that instance, even if the board doesn't have any real legal power.
Gilbert says all this comes down to common sense. He says judges' ethics rules dictate there should never be a perception of conflict on a judge's part.
This is about public perception of fairness. We don't want the public to suspect that because of the judge's affiliation with the Children's Hospital in this case, that she somehow tilted or even subconsciously favored the interests of the defendant.
As for Judge Haynes, she declined our request for an interview, saying her ruling speaks for itself. Annette Olerud has now filed an ethics complaint against the judge.
Even if her intent was not to use her power and influence, it certainly leaves the appearance of impropriety.
The Olerud family has appealed Judge Haynes' ruling, as well as her decision not to recuse herself is now at the Court of Appeals. As for the ethics complaint, very rarely are those results ever made public. It only happens if the court of the judiciary pursues formal charges. It then becomes public. We will continue to follow this. Bob?